Okay? In the back, can you hear me? All right. I feel really loud. Do I need this on?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. If I get one yes, I'm gonna leave it on. I'm gonna try not to yell. Sometimes I get loud. Okay.
I think the volume may be low because the passenger speaks really low.
Yeah.
It may turn it up for him.
Okay, well, I'm gonna push this back so I'm not all screaming at y'all. Okay, so the title of this presentation is Cultural Considerations for Developing Professional Relationships. So, in this little session that we're gonna have today, I want you to know about how different cultures differ, what am I gonna say? I'm trying to say this without reading. How people interact with one another, okay? Using their own cultural values, and they're different when it comes to making relationships, okay? I want you to look at and learn how cultures differ in verbal communication, nonverbal communication, and from that, I want you to be able to recognize your own relationship patterns, because there are things that you just say in your mind, but this is just the way I do it. This is just the way it is, and you may not realize that it is heavily culturally influenced. When a lot of people who look like you or came from your same area said, yeah, this is how we do it, this is what's right, that's like a cultural thing a lot of times that we just assume is just regular, and it may not be, okay? So, we're going to do a brief review, so don't get bored on me yet, but since nobody remembered their P1 year when I was top teaching, and I was teaching the best class ever, every time, and y'all forgot it, we're going to have to review, okay? So, what is culture? I'm not going to read all of these to you all, but it's really, culture is just a set of beliefs that you have. They may change over time, but what studies show is they really don't. Your parents teach you a certain level of beliefs. It's the story that you tell about yourselves, right? This is what we do. We value hard work. We value education. We are really strong in going to temple or synagogue or church, or we do these things, right? You're not born with culture, you learn culture. You learn who you are, not just from your family and your community, but the news will tell you, right? These people do this, those people do that. The media, the TV that you watch, the books that you read all tell a story, and from that you are developing your identities. So culture is also considered a set of rules that dictate what it takes to be successful, what it takes to be unsuccessful, what is rude, what is polite. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And so I'm going to highlight two cultural values. We covered them in P1, but I'm going to bring them back up again, and then we're going to go a little bit deeper into what that looks like, okay? So I want to make sure, though, we talk about what culture is not. We're not talking about stereotyping people. And a stereotype is when you take a negative, experience and you apply it to the whole group. I went to New York, I got cussed out, therefore all New Yorkers cuss people out. Y'all get what I'm saying? Okay? But there are generalizations that you can make about certain people groups that are based upon research and observable patterns, okay? A generalization is drawing a conclusion from what you see. So you may say, I went to Mexico, and every time I went there, every time I said hello, they kissed me on the cheek 3 times, okay? So I can fairly conclude that that's the way Mexicans greet each other, by giving each other a kiss, twice or 3 times on the cheek, something like that, okay? So when I'm pulling this data, it's research data over periods of years that people from particular countries said about themselves, right? Not observers or strangers looking in, but this is what the actual people said about themselves. And I like to talk a lot about what other countries believe, because y'all are an amalgamation of your mother country's belief. But the research says, right? You may say, I'm born and raised in the United States. Research says you maintain anywhere from 40 to 90% of your mother country's culture. It just depends on how far removed you are from the boat. I've done these studies before, and I've worked with people before, and they said, oh my gosh, one woman said, I didn't even realize how German I was, and it's because her grandmother, drilled in her, the way to behave, the way to do things, and they were very dramatic, and she didn't realize that that's what it was, okay? And how many of y'all were not born in the United States? 1, 2, 3, 4, okay. And so you'll be able to see quite easily, do you remember coming to the United States? The shock, right? Americans behave very different from the country that you came from, right? So we'll talk a little bit about that. I really want to engage in conversation because y'all are about to go out and engage with people who are different from you. You know, Houston is the most diverse city in the nation. And if you're going to be serving our public, you're going to be meeting people from all walks of life. And you just need to know just a little bit about who you are so you can know, like, when people kind of cross your boundaries or you say, okay, that's weird or that's a different culture, before you go judging people, okay? So the other thing I want to say is that culture is not universal behavior. Everybody gets sad. Everybody goes to sleep. That's not cultural, okay? It's not personal behavior. There are people who are born being really just easygoing, placid, cool people. And then you have other people that were born and they were high strung and they were high energetic and, you know, all of that. That's not culture, that's personality. That's something that you are born with, and that doesn't change, okay? And then we've got, personal behavior and then personality. Everybody's got a particular set of traits, and they're just gonna be who they are, okay? All right, so if y'all remember, I talked about the iceberg being a metaphor. A lot of times y'all will see behaviors, and you know I'm interacting with somebody different from you, because you can see the iceberg at the tip, you know, emerging from the water. And you say, okay, that's an iceberg, I know a little bit about that, but what you're not paying attention to is all the stuff that's beneath. And if you get too close to an iceberg, what happens is your ship sinks because there were things that you didn't see under the water. So the things that drives cultural behaviors are the things you cannot see, the attitudes behind why people do what they do, the values they have. You may be able to see gender differences, right, in a particular culture, but you don't understand what drives it. You may look at it and just say, oh, that culture, they demoralize women and they hate women, because I'm just looking and I'm using my own lens, right, to say that. And when you talk to women within the culture, we're like, no, we honor women, you know? And so, so again, I just want you to pay attention to what you see versus how much deeper it is that you really got to stop and take consideration of as you're forming relationships with people around you. Okay, so let's start off with considerations for relationships. And I want to go over the concept of self, which is a cultural value. We have individualists and we have collectivists. Do y'all remember this? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Anyone's like, nah, I don't remember this at all. Okay, I'm just going to go over it again, and we're going to see where we lie in the classroom, because where you are in terms of how you see yourself, right, determines in a lot of ways how you relate to other people. Okay, so an individualist, really what this concept of self has everything to do with responsibility, okay? The person who was raised as an individualist, they have to be responsible for themselves. They are trained to look for yourselves, look out for yourselves, be independent. That is the greatest thing you can do in this family, is take care of yourself. And I'm raising you to go off into the world and to be successful and not be dependent on anyone, okay? Which means individuals focus a lot on themselves. Well, if I gotta be responsible for myself, I gotta think about what I want, what my needs are, what my goals are. I'm at a job. I have to take care of my family. I've got to, so you see a lot of I, right? The workers, if you're an individualist, don't mind recognition. If you are doing a project, a work project, where everyone gets paid a bonus based upon their contribution, right? And you did 50% of the work, and the other 3 people did divided by 50% of the work. As an individualist, you're going to expect to get 50% of the pay. Okay? Why? Because I did 50% of the work. So they don't mind recognition, they don't mind standing out, they don't mind saying, oh look, you did 50, you did the bulk share, thank you, you're great, okay? They don't mind that at all. So when they think about who they are, they can see somebody within their group doing something crazy or embarrassing, and they'll say, that's not me. I don't have to be embarrassed, okay? I look at Americans, very individualist. I would go to other countries and they would say, look at that American, they did something crazy. Don't you feel terrible? I'm like, I'm not that person. That's not me, okay? But let's talk about the other side, the collectivists. The collectivists see shared responsibility, right? So you have to look out for your family. Your family is looking out for you, okay? And so your identity is based on the group that you belong to. Okay? So you're always told to pursue group harmony. And with that comes a lot of things. That's respecting the elders. That is sometimes changing your language, the way that you talk to people, right? There's a different set of language for people who are older versus people who are younger. Children are taught to depend on each other, work in groups, help each other out. And then employees don't like to stand out. Why? Because it's a group effort. So, go back to the scenario. You're a collectivist, you did 50% of the work, you would be embarrassed about getting 50% of the pay. It's like, we did this together. It's a group effort, we're all successful, and, recognition, I want my team to be recognized, not me, okay? And so people strongly identify with their group, your last name, your community, the place that you went to. So and that identity is so strong that when somebody causes shame, the whole family feels shame, right? Little Johnny failed out of school or didn't get that university placement or whatever. The shame is just so great. You hear about somebody not doing well in the public sphere, the whole country gets embarrassed, right? And so it's a different type of mindset when you're a collectivist or individual. So let's just take a vote. Let's see how many people we got here. How would you rank yourself? Now, we all have adaptive selves, okay? Especially for those of y'all who have come to the United States and feel like maybe you might have adapted more American values, that's fine. But I want you to think about what you would teach your children, okay? If you have children or if you plan to have children, what would you teach them? We look out for each other, right? What comes out in emergency situations? Because that's where your values lie. You forget all this adaptability, you go straight to what you know, okay? So, when I'm looking at this, we see we have about, let me see if I can share how that looks for y'all. 50% collectivist, 21% not answering. Okay, why are you not answering? 14% individualist. I'm making y'all pick a line because it really is like, well, I'm just both. Actually, you're really not. You may be so adaptable that you trick yourself, right? Or you can say, well, I've had to ride both cultures. You know, when I'm in America, I'm in one way. When I'm in my home country, I'm in another way. And sometimes it's easier to kind of blur those lines. And so it may be easier for you to switch, right? But usually you have a preference. Okay, so it looks like we got majority collectivists and some people who just don't know. All right. So I want to talk about what this looks like when it comes to relationships. So when you come from an individualist, when you hold individualist values that typically are in the United States or in Western European societies, the way that they develop friendships is, I like to use the wedding cake as an illustration, okay? So, and tell me if you've seen this, especially y'all collectivist folks, right? Think of these circles as levels of engagement. So when you look at this, the dotted circle graph, When you look at this outside ring, the dots represent people. And so this is the outer layer of engagement. Like think about you're walking across campus, you're going through the store, you're talking to a lot of people. There's a lot of people in that outer circle, right? Especially here in Texas. Everybody talks to each other. Hey, how you doing? I was in the store the other day and the woman was just walking around talking to herself and looks at me like, is there potato salad here? And she's just talking, right? You got people just walk up to you and just say, oh girl, I like those glasses, and just regular things. Hi, how are you? You've got a lot of people in that outer bubble. Americans will talk to anybody seen as smiley but shallow, okay? Because we walk around and say, hey, how you doing? How you doing? How are you is a greeting. We don't really want to know. It's a greeting, okay? Because you don't have to answer. It's like, hey, how you doing? How you doing? And you keep on going. Nobody stops to answer, right? So there's a lot of people in that outer circle. And then when you go into the next circle, which is a closer level of engagement, there's fewer people in here. These are the people that you would put in your friend group. You would invite them over. Maybe they may see your house. You know what I'm saying? You may go to worship with them, or they're the people that you would maybe study with. You know what I'm saying? So there's fewer people up in this group. And then when you get into the center area, which I'm going to call the inner sanctum, right? These are the people with whom you share your life with, whom you share your secrets with. And there's fewer in there. There may be a spouse, a best friend, and a couple of siblings. Not even all the siblings. Just one or two people, okay? So take that illustration and turn it on its side, and it looks like a cake. Meaning, it's really easy to jump this layer of engagement. You see this little boundary here? Real easy. This is I'm talking to everybody. I'm walking down the street. I'll talk to a wall if they're talking to me. I'll just talk, right? But to get to this level of friendship, that's a little bit harder, right? That takes a little bit more time to scale this. It takes more just interaction. But then here, it's like, listen, I got two best friends. That's it. I don't need no more. I'm done. Okay? So it's even harder to get to this level of friendship. This is why you talk to a lot of Americans and they say sometimes it's hard to make friends, or they can be lonely, because it takes so long to get to that inner sanctum. Does this make sense? How many people say, yeah, that's me? I can say this is me, definitely. Okay? All right, so now let's look at non-Western relationship pairing. And usually this is represented by collectivist people, okay? So now, let's look at that outer circle. That outer circle, there is few people in there. How many of you have gone to, let's see, I've been to some very populous places like Korea or China, let me think of some other places, where it's a lot of people, a collectivist society. What would happen? Let me ask you, okay, let me give you this scenario. In America, you're walking down the street, you bump somebody accidentally, what happens?
Excuse me.
Excuse me, sorry, I invaded your space. Oh, I'm sorry. Sometimes arguments ensue, something like a, hey, what are you doing? Okay. When I went over to Korea, it was crowded. It was like millions of people in this city, right? And people were like, boom, 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 as you walk down the street. What do you think the engagement is? A stare down? You just keep walking, right? There's nothing. I found myself saying, these people, they don't even say excuse me. They like ran into me. They don't like whatever, Why? Do you know why? Because when you're a collectivist, your identity is matched by the people in your in-group. And those outside people on the street are not on your in-group. So you don't have an obligation to say, excuse me, whatever. It's not even considered rude, it just is. Everybody's got their group that they belong to, and you don't count, so I don't have to engage you. And it's not considered rude unless unless you are an individualist who's like, you invaded my space, right? So that first level, it's like, very few people in there. So then you get the next level of involvement, and these are the people with whom you go to work. These are the people that you might have gone to school with all of your life. They knew you. Typically, in a lot of collectivist societies, they stay very close. You'll have people that all grew up in the same community, they all stay near each other, they all know each other's cousins and grandparents and all of that type of stuff, right? So you've got some of those circles. And then, if you go into the inner sanctum, it's even bigger. Tell me why. Who's in that inner sanctum? Family, right? And we're not just talking about mom and dad and a sibling. We're talking about grandparents, aunties, uncles, cousins. When something serious happens, your whole family knows it, right? And y'all all share it, and that's a way bigger circle. So now let's flip this on its side. That first outer wall is a really hard nut to crack when you're dealing with other people that have espoused this method or this cultural pattern of developing friendships, okay? In fact, there's a lot of articles and stuff that talk about Japan in particularly. They actually have a dotted line around here. That dotted line represents their hospitality. It is so great and so warm that foreigners will go over to Japan and they'll be like, oh, I made it in. I made it into the family. They didn't even get here. They're out here. Their hospitality. You know what I'm saying? They're like, wait, what just happened? I thought I was in. Okay? So it takes time to get here. And you may not ever get here because this is reserved for family and a few other besties. Okay? So how many people say, yeah, that's what relationship making looks like. That's normal. Anybody? Okay. I was about to say, typically, the stronger the collectivist you are, the stronger that type of relationship pattern is. Okay? Same thing with this other one. The stronger the individualist you are, the more your relationship pattern will be. So let's take this to developing professional relationships, right? So you may think some people are really standoffish, and it's because you gotta spend the time, and just think about it, with both cases, you gotta spend the time and the effort to be able to get into there. But think about what your expectations are when it comes to relating to people, okay? And so why it may be hard for you to maybe become friends or to have a really good relationship with maybe a particular group. If you know you're in a hospital and you're always serving a particular group of people, it's like, wow, this hospital serves a lot of Haitians, okay? You may want to think about, what does that mean? If you know the inner sanctum is composed of family, that means you need to relate to family. If it's like, I'm not going to be like, I can't talk to you, brother, right? I mean, there's a certain level of privacy, but you know what I'm saying? If you're trying to help maybe convince a person to take their medication, you might need to talk to the in-group people who would have more sway than you might, okay? Just some things to think about. Any questions about this? Okay, does this make sense? Is this surprising you? Okay. Why? Why?
I don't know. I just thought that collectivists would be speaking to everyone and including them versus individuals.
In-group, out-group is a real thing. Collectivists have an in-group.
So it's
An individual is, it's me. It's me and mine. But mine is like my child, my spouse. You know what I'm saying? My friend. But even still, that's loose. Because it's like, if my friend does something wrong, I may call the police on my friend. You know what I'm saying? I have to stand the line, like, because it's me. I'm not going down for you. A collectivist will just feel a very high collectivist will feel a very strong pull to go down with the ship if the whole in-group is sinking. And there's a huge pressure to conform, way more than an individualist would. Individuals have pressure to conform. I mean, not to say we're like so disconnected from our families and all of that, but like it's a bigger pressure, right? Which is why in some of these countries you see like high suicide rates in children who don't do well in school because the shame culture is so strong. okay?
Why jumping from one layer to another layer takes that much time? What is the barrier for that?
Trust, time. Western people, individualists tend to move a little bit faster and want to jump in, let's just think business relationships, okay? When it comes to business relationships, especially when people really began to work on developing intercultural, like the United States wanted to go and sell their products to other countries and get into that market, they found what worked in the States didn't work in other countries. Because other countries have this thing like, we'll get directly to the point, here's why I want you to buy my product, here's what this is, I'm coming in to sell you. Non-Western countries will be like, hey, Linda, talk to me. Tell me about your parents. Tell me about your upbringing. Tell me about this. All of these private questions that individuals will be like, that ain't none of your business. Do you want to buy my product or not? Collectivist societies are way more relational, way more. So you have to adapt to what is really being expected. Sometimes individuals, I'm talking specifically business partnerships. A lot of times individuals, countries, they're like, it works here. So buy this product. Okay, why? Because blah, 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 blah. I don't care if you're a mean person. I mean, I do if you're mean to me, I might not buy it. But you know what I'm saying? I'm not asking you about your personal life before I buy your product, right? Western, non-Western countries tend to be more relational. So there's this disconnect about what does it take to have a professional relationship. Westerners and Americans can be way more objective and impersonal and actually feel comfortable with that. Don't get all up in my business, right? Whereas collectivists operate from being up in your business, because I haven't determined if I trust you. So there's a disconnect on how business works. And some people would say, that's not professional, you're asking me all of this. From an individual standpoint, collectivists would be like, if I want to work with you, I gotta know these things. So there's that element of what is perceived as professional, appropriate. Like asking somebody how much money that they make. I have a Jordanian neighbor whom I love, but she crosses my boundaries all the time, asking me stuff like that. You don't ask me how much I make. Like what? But it's not a personal question. When I lived in Korea for a time, it's very hierarchical. So everybody has a rank. You have to know your rank, because then your language has to match your rank. If I'm talking to somebody higher than me than lower than me. So a lot of times when we meet people, they start asking you a whole bunch of questions. What do you do? All of this type of stuff, so that I can figure out, are you a superior or a subordinate, right? And then I can adjust my language, because that is what's polite. And that will throw off people who are not accustomed to that. Does that make sense? I see you nodding your head over there. Where are you from? I thought you weren't born here. Vietnam, okay. Is it the same thing, hierarchical languages and stuff like that? Yes. All right. So am I telling the truth, y'all? Does that make sense? Okay. And again, it's all good. It's all good. It's just different. And when you don't know what you're looking at, that's when you hit that iceberg, right? And then your shit sinks. Okay. So now let's talk about verbal communication. Remember this, degree of directness, okay? This is the other value I want to reintroduce to you all. Because you've got groups of people that value directness. And there are other groups of people that value indirectness when they talk to people. So direct people mean what they say and say what this means. And it does not mean that they don't adjust the tone, right? A direct person can say, I can ask a direct person, do you like this dress? And they can say, no, I don't like the dress. Or they can say, oh girl, the dress is not really working, but if you had this and this, maybe you just need some accessories. Both are still very direct. It doesn't matter the tone, you still said no, okay? An indirect person would be like, your elbows are pretty, But I love your hair, but your personality is so vibrant. Would you like some tea? Okay, I mean, just total deflection. So direct people, there's no need to read them between the lines. And one of the reasons why direct cultures are so have to be explicit is because there's no shared understanding, there's no shared history. In the United States, we're only a couple hundred years old, and we've got so many people from so many different backgrounds, we do not have the time and the cultural sameness to have a whole bunch of shared meaning, right? People who are indirect typically come from societies that have long cultures, like thousands of years old. You know how you interact with someone, and I know, like, I can talk to a friend, they know me so well that I don't have to say anything. I could just give them a look, and they know exactly what it means, right? So imagine that for a culture that's been around thousands of years, right? Where there are just rules you just don't have to say, things you just don't have to say. In fact, it's expected to read them in between the lines, because if you are direct, it's considered rude. It's too blunt. It's just too forceful, okay? So direct people will tell it like it is, and they expect you to do the same. And it's a respectful, honorable thing to do. Hey, you got something hanging from your nose right there. I just thought I'd let you know, right? A direct person is like, oh, thank you, right? Indirect person might not say anything. It's like you're standing up, right? Like, no, like, not in front of everybody, right? And then you have to think about the context. Who is this person? This is a professor. I would never tell a professor that. They're in public. I would never tell them that. You know, so you would go through this whole thing of, do I say something or not? Direct people be like, fix it, okay? The issue that you may have is when an indirect person and a direct person speak, and then they cross over, right? Like the indirect person may read in between the lines because they're so used to doing that. Indirect people, when they're talking to each other, can just kind of hint, imply, use silence, and everybody knows what they're talking about because they can read in between the lines. But direct people miss it because unless you tell them bluntly, they miss it. Okay? So again, with direct people, yes means yes. With indirect people, yes can mean no. And you just gotta be reading between the lines. Look at the context. Look at everything. And they're like, can you do this? Yes, it's possible. That means no, right? You just can't always say that. But a direct person would not see it, okay?
So how we can trust a direct person?
So you're asked a question that's very cultural. Because a direct person will say, I can't trust you because you're not telling me the truth. An indirect person will say, I can't trust you because you're too blunt and you're so insensitive and you don't see the whole context. You're insensitive and you're dull, so I can't trust you. That's two different people holding so tightly to their values that they can't see what the other person, you have to put yourself in their shoes. Direct people have to look a little bit more at context. Indirect people have to sometimes not take things so sensitively that they can actually speak out and say it and not fear backlash or offense, because direct people are not as offendable in that sense, right? They get more offended if you don't say something. And so the key to that really is relationship. When I know you and I know that you mean well, and I can, you know what I'm saying? That I can trust that you've been, when you said something blunt to me as an indirect speaker, I can say, you might want to rephrase that, or, when you're talking to these other people, you come off too strong. I'm just letting you know, just some things to think about. Especially when you are working, let's just say you understand these principles, and you're a direct speaker, and your colleague is a direct speaker, and all these patients that you're dealing with, culturally come from an indirect background. You may have to tell them, hey, you know what? I wouldn't say it like this if I were you. You know what I'm saying? There's different ways of saying it, and some of it comes with practice and relationship, which is why it's important to know these values and developing relationships. Okay? So it looks like we've got a lot of direct speakers, and some are indirect. And a lot of no answers. Okay, why aren't you answering no? How hard is it?
It's not taking one.
It's not taking yours? Okay.
Mine is twice. My name is twice.
Oh, that's okay. When I pull this up, and by the way, Linda, if you need the sign-in sheet, I can totally pull this and give it to you. I don't know if you have to take attendance or whatnot, but I can send it to you, and it says, whoever's logged in is counted as here, y'all. you don't answer, I see you. All right, so I want to show you this, and this might look familiar again to you, which is the role of context and directness, okay? Direct people can be very direct, again, because what is valued is explicit verbal communication. It's considered to be efficient, it's considered to be respectful, it's considered to be honest, and especially if it's objective. Just tell me the facts, tell me what's going on. You know what I'm saying? How you feel about a matter is not as important as just telling me what the issue is. On the other hand, when you have indirect speakers, context fully matters. The context means, where are we? The setting that we're in, the person that I'm talking to, the relationship with the person that I'm talking to. I gotta think about the consequence of what happens if I say something. All of those different things will determine if an indirect speaker will even speak or not, and how they will speak or not. A direct person will just kind of spit it out, okay? And so given that, indirect people think a lot about their values, and they think a lot about opinions, and words don't always convey what is really being thought or said, okay? So let's talk about some techniques really quick. These are verbal communication techniques used by both direct and indirect speakers, but they have different meanings, okay? So let's talk about the use of understatement. So let's just say somebody said, and they're a direct speaker, well, that was kind of a small incident. How would you look at that? That thing that happened over there that caused a mismatch, that was a small incident. How would a direct speaker interpret that statement? That was a small mistake. Let's just say that. How would they interpret that statement? It was a small mistake. A direct speaker means what they say and say what if they say that was a small mistake, then you interpret it as, okay, it's harmless. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't mean too much of anything. If an indirect speaker said, that was a small mistake.
Huge.
That was huge. You messed up big time. Now, do you see how misinterpretations can come into play, right? When somebody said, oh, that was a small mistake. Oh, really? Thanks, girl. I can just move on. So, gosh, my dissertation chair was from St. Lucia, and she was trained in the British system, and so she would look at my work, and I would turn in a paper, and she was saying, this could use some work. And I already knew it was hot trash. This could use some tweaking, right? Okay, what about changing the subject? If a direct person changes the subject, how would a direct person interpret that? Yeah, we just moved on. We're not talking about this, we just moved on. If an indirect person changes the subject, what could that mean? Indirect speakers, or those familiar with indirect speakers, how would you handle changing the subject? How would you interpret it?
They're trying to avoid the subject.
Say that again?
They're trying to avoid the subject.
Avoid the subject, why? I may have to tell you no, and I don't want to tell you no. I may have to tell you something negative, and I don't want to tell you something negative. I don't want to tell you that dress makes you look terrible. So I'm going to say, would you like some tea? I'm going to get out of that. An indirect speaker would say, oh, I guess I better change my dress, right? That's how they interpret that. But, a direct speaker would miss it. Okay, what about saying yes? A direct speaker, how would a direct speaker interpret somebody telling them yes? Yes means yes, right? If an indirect speaker says yes,
They're gonna change their mind later.
It can
No, they never changed their mind. That answer might be no. When you start reading up stuff, there are countries that are particular, especially indirect countries. I just remember, like, y'all can Google this, the Indian no. People from India who will not tell you, they'll just say yes, but it's like this, yes, and you better be able to read in between the lines, and that's something that's just missing, right? Because you gotta look at the context. Can you do this thing? Yes. And yes can mean no. So you've gotta and let me tell you this, okay, a few years ago when I was working at Texas A&M, I had a graduate student that needed to work on some programming, okay? And so we gave him a deadline and we said, can you do this thing, put together this program? And he said, yes. Okay, so he went off, tried to do it, couldn't figure out how to do it, didn't want to tell us he couldn't do it, tried calling his friends in India to try and get some of the codes so he can so he was steadily working on it. The deadline came and went, and it was like, what happened? Well, he didn't want to say anything. Why? Because you're my supervisor. I don't want to tell you, there's shame and there's this and that. So it was like we had to give him permission. You can tell us no. You can tell us this is going to take not 6 weeks, this is going to take 8 weeks. You can tell us I can't do this until I get this particular code. I had to give permission because that was like something so foreign, just something like, you know what I'm saying? Because I follow orders, this and that, whatever, I can't tell you no, all of that, right? So we had to learn the hard way. It was like, please, because now we're in trouble and we're looking at you and you sitting there thinking you're trying to do your best and we're looking at you like, why do you lie, right? I mean, but we knew since we taught, we're in the office at Pop Culture. That was what I was doing. I was an intercultural communications trainer. Here you are having this incident right here in your office. So you learn to deconstruct it, okay? Let's see, how about saying nothing in response to a proposal or suggestion? Hey, you want to go to the movies? Direct person says nothing. How do you interpret that?
No.
No.
It may be okay.
They're thinking about it.
Silent is consent, right?
Right, so silence a lot of times gives approval, but if they just don't say anything, you might say they're thinking about it or something, but if an indirect speaker, and you also may gloss it over, hey, you want to go to the movies? They don't say anything, okay, we're going to the movies, right? If an indirect speaker gives you silence, that silence has way more words, okay, than a direct speaker, way more meaning, and you may have to pause and dig a little deeper. Okay, how about telling a story that seems off the subject?
Now, with what you are saying, my interpretation, does it mean that an indirect person, most cases, tells lie or what?
They tell what?
They tell lie?
No, well, a direct speaker would say you're lying. If you question the integrity, indirect speakers have integrity, and they would tell you, I don't lie, and I am not trying to cheat you or anything like that. But when everybody has the shared understanding and you give an off-color answer, you do that to honor the person, to not shame the person, to not shame yourself. Everyone understands the intent, so you really have to read between the lines. A direct person will say, you're lying. You say that to an indirect speaker, you have shamed them, you have dishonored them, and all of that, because they're not trying to lie. It comes from honor. We didn't cover that value, but that's what it's coming from. If you don't know what you're looking at, you break a relationship by calling someone a liar, right? So it's this thing of, okay, so, if you are the supervisor, y'all are about to be pharmacists, you'll have the title and all of that. You got somebody coming in that's indirect. Give them permission to stand up and tell you no, especially if you're direct, right? If you're a direct person, you need that to be able to function, okay? So again, telling a story that seems off the subject. To a direct speaker, it might be like, what? Why are you talking about that? Someone else would be like, and I can just think about grandparents or whatever. Hey, should we go to the movies or should we just, here we go, here's the story. Should we buy this expensive thing right here? This costs like $15. Well, one day when I was a little girl, I went to the store and I wanted to buy something. And when I paid full price for it, I was really dismayed because I realized the next day it was on sale at half off. And if I had just waited, I wouldn't. You know, you just tell the story. You read into it. What was that person trying to say? Wait. A direct person would be like, wait, what? What? Just say no. Just say yes. Okay? I had that happen to me one time. I remember in church, and my Bible study leader was from Mexico, and I said something, and he went on this long story, and in the end kind of summed up with why he said something that was completely opposite to what I said. And that was his way of saying he disagreed with me without saying he disagreed with me. And I heard it, and I was like, oh, and everybody's looking at me like, what's the deal? Why? He wasn't talking about you. He was directly talking to me. I picked up on it. I got that, right? So anyway, so these are different techniques. Again, informing a superior about something that's going on. If a direct person said, hey, tell me if you got a problem, it's like, I'm not going to tell you, I'm going to tell your boss, right? Direct person would be very
straightforward.
yeah, well, a direct person would be like, why can't you tell me to my face? What's going on, right? It seems sneaky. An indirect person would say, I cannot tell you. Not only that, who am I to correct you? I'm a subordinate. I'm going to tell your boss so your boss can tell you, right? If I'm an indirect boss, I'm not going to listen to subordinate anyway. Why? Because I'm the boss, right? So I will listen to a subordinate. So it doesn't seem bad. To a direct speaker, it would seem bad. To indirect, it's polite, okay? So you got to look at some of the motives behind it. Tell me a qualified answer. I think so. It's probable. I think I can. A direct speaker would say, oh, that means yes. An indirect speaker would be like, oh, that means no. Okay? And then there's the significance of what is not said. Sometimes you got to be able to read into the silence. So it's tricky. It's tricky on both sides. Because if you're an indirect speaker and you're used to reading into everything, direct speakers will always be so blunt. You would think everybody's angry with you. You would think everybody is rude. You would think everybody's got all these issues, and you're putting words that aren't there, right? You're putting meaning that's actually not there. And direct speakers will look at indirect speakers as you're lying or you're just doing all this other stuff. Just tell me what you need to know. So again, this is why it's important to be able to have a relationship with people and look at building trust. Okay? Some other verbal communication techniques. Here's a quote to your point, John.
Okay.
It goes down to what you value. Indirect people that tend to come from collectivist society value harmony and above all else. Okay? Let's look at culturally influenced reasoning patterns. In the United States, let me ask you a question. How do you write a paper? What's the rules? How do you write a paper? A good paper looks like what? Abstract. Do you remember grade school when you had to write a paper? What did they tell you to do?
An introduction?
Say what you're gonna say, say what you say, and summarize what you just said.
Okay, that's it in a nutshell. Say what you're going to say your main point, give your supporting things, and then summarize again. You get right to the point. I think we need to do A because 1, 2, 3, therefore we need to do A.
Oh, yeah.
That's starting with the conclusion. That is an actual culturally influenced way of what is considered correct thought, what is considered correct papers, correct communication, and that's how we tend to talk to one another. We tend to. That's at least what we value. You've got other societies that, and so I gave this little picture of the Dodge, right? Get straight to the point. Tell straight to the point. Give your supporting evidence. You don't have to talk about your feelings. You ain't got to talk about a whole bunch of other things. You can talk about your feelings, but get straight to the point. Make your conclusion. This is how you make a conclusion, a good one, that I will listen to because it's appropriate, at least in this culture. In other cultures, they finish with the conclusion. So they start off with feelings and talking and, and I think this, and studies say this, and then you should go here with that, and then this thing happened over there, and you just kind of funnel down to you get to your main point at the end, okay? You see this very prevalently in Middle Eastern cultures, where the good point is made at the end of the paper, and that's how people talk too. So when you have a person that starts with the conclusion and a person that ends with the conclusion, when they get together, you're talking, case in point, y'all are talking to a patient, you're trying to get to the bottom line of what drug do you need, right? And some people will say, I need risperidone, or whatever, that's a drug, right? Is that schizophrenia drug, something like that? Okay, I need risperidone, because, I've got this, this diagnosis, schizophrenic, this is what the doctor said, boom, 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 boom. Another one who starts with the conclusion like, well, I haven't been feeling good, and well, my symptoms are like this, and well, the doctor said I needed this, but I don't know, and well, blah, 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 and you're spiraling. And a person who starts with the conclusion in mind may be tempted to jump in and tell the conclusion. So you need this drug. No, I need blah, 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 blah. So you need this. No, why do you keep cutting me off? You gotta wait to them to get to their conclusion. I used to grade papers and again, I know specifically Middle Eastern way of thinking. And I would come and be like, hey, you need to take this last paragraph, put this at the top, and then make your points, right? Because you make direct or not direct, start with the conclusion, people, like, they're always guessing what you're getting at. Because we're always looking at, so what's the point? So what's the point? So get to the point, right? And you will know that you are finished with the conclusion person if you feel like every time you try and tell a story, somebody's cutting you off and telling you to get to the point. Or someone trying to interpret it. You're like, no, just let me get to my point, okay? But also, if you're the other way, you just start with the conclusion, then the people that finish the conclusion, wait a minute, how'd you get to that point? Wait, how do you feel? So tell me some more details, more about this. And there's this disconnect between how do you get to a logical conclusion. And then you have this one down at the bottom where you all arrive at the conclusion all at once. This is in a lot of Asian cultures, which is when they're trying to find consensus in business meetings and stuff. And this takes time, where they talk, they reason, they look at all things, they keep going back, they kind of circle back, and next thing you know, it all kind of merges, boom, this is how we come to a conclusion in a business meeting, okay? So when you're thinking about if y'all ever have to work overseas, there's even different ways you rationalize and come to a conclusion. A lot of times the way that you write is the way that you talk. So just be mindful of somebody who, especially if you're one of those people and you're trained in, start with the conclusion in mind, and somebody just starts with, well, I'm up here, you just gotta wait for them to get down to the point, okay? Does this make sense? Have y'all seen this? Okay. Some other things to think about that we're not gonna hit on just for the sake of time. I can't even say this word. Chronemics is how time impacts communication. Now this is a whole deep thing, but what I want you to think about is how time impacts your rate of how you talk, what you consider appropriate of time in between the first speaker and the second speaker. Do you start talking before the other person finishes? Or do you feel like you need to wait and there needs to be a turn taking? When you talk to people, especially in some of like the African cultures, you start talking when the other person is talking, and that's the ways you show that you're listening. And so you see people like, yeah, girl, and it works. You get around other people who feel like there needs to be turn taking, and as soon as someone says, blah, 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 yeah, they stop. Like, you didn't let me finish speaking. Okay? There are things that you need to consider. How much time do you need to wait in response? If I ask you a and you want to respond 10 seconds later, are you comfortable with that? You can go to some Native American cultures and it's space. You gotta have that hang time space. If you start working with people who are different, you just can't jump in. Americans are so quick, they will be like, I'm comfortable and uncomfortable with space. So if you're not, or silence, if you're not talking, I gotta fill it in, okay? So that's just something to think about. And then also language and code switching as well. If anyone has grown up being either bicultural or bilingual, you know, like, it's one thing to say, I'm going to speak one way when I'm around my people, and then when I get out in front of another group of people, I'm going to switch up to whatever language is in power, right? The language that is going to help give you the best opportunity. So even if you grew up in the hood and you spoke one way around your friends, you know it's not going to work working in a hospital, right? And so, those are other cultural concepts to think about, okay? People who speak several different languages, and you know, like, there are things even with language patterns where, you know, you throw out idioms, and you throw out things that even people who speak English very well may not always understand it. So those are cultural concepts as well that you just wanted to think about that may block communication, okay? Then there's some nonverbal things to consider as well. Let me ask you a question. So, what does this mean?
Okay.
Okay. What else?
Three.
What else?
Zero.
Do you know in some countries this means it's the same equivalent as flipping somebody the bird? It's a very, very obscene gesture. Okay? Yeah. Also, I think if you go to Japan, this means change. One, you can stick that right in there. Okay? What about this?
Good.
Okay, right? This is the Aggie sign. Get them. And then you go to other countries and this means up yours. Okay? Or this could also mean six. Because this is a lie. Okay? So this could also mean drink. Okay? So I want you to think about some things when you're looking at behavior and interpreting facial expressions. Gestures are not universal, they're cultural, okay? So nonverbal behaviors fall into three main categories. Behaviors that exist in two cultures that have the same meaning. So we both go like this, I go, hey, hey, the person's like, hey, hey, and we're good, okay? Behaviors that exist that have different meanings. I go, hey, hey, and another person's like, six. Okay? Or behaviors that have a meaning in one culture and they mean nothing to another one. So when I go like this, in Russia, this means you're making this more complicated.
Don't touch yourself. Don't be
So sometimes you may be in a situation where you're working with someone and they just think, you know, what is that? What does that mean? I don't know what are you choking? No. You know what I mean? Like, so just think about that, because those things are cultural. Okay? Some nonverbal techniques, communication. How about touching? What do y'all think about touching? Is that cultural?
Yes.
You know, folks who are Muslim, the men and women don't touch each other, right? And so unless you're like close within a family, so those are things to consider. How about eye contact? Very much so. You know, I tell my children, look me in the eye when I'm talking to you, right? But then others who like other cultures are like, if you want to be respectful, don't stare them in the eye. So those are some really legit things because I'm like, you know, I've had students come to me and they won't look me in the eye. And I have to ask myself, are they being shady or are they trying to show me honor? And I end on honor, right? Because typically we have a lot of international students. And there'll be some, especially when I'm talking and I'm giving instruction, I'm doing this and that, whatever, they won't look me in the eye. And I have to be cool with that. I usually am because I know what it is, okay? How about the use of your left hand? Use your left hand to shake somebody's hand. Yes, no? Right, because in Arab cultures, they use the left hand for bathroom purposes. You never offer anybody your left hand, okay? How about showing the soles of your feet towards someone? yes gesture. What is yes?
Acknowledgement.
This is no in Turkey, and this is yes. Dead serious, okay? So just be mindful that when you walk into a situation that things feel kind of, and then there's in India, this is kind of a yes, you know? So I mean, you don't know what you're dealing with, okay? So just be mindful of that, okay? The other thing, space, proximity. There are different levels of space that's cultural. Intimate space, the space between you and your loved one, your child, is really short, okay, like an inch to maybe a foot away. Personal distance is the distance that you will accept people to be in your space. In the UK has the largest personal space. They need 3 feet from people. You go to Middle Eastern countries and they need 6 inches. And some of it, it's like polite to feel the breath of someone's face on you, right? So then they tell these stories of intercultural communication where, there's an Arab kind of chasing a UK person around the room because he's trying to get close to talk to you and the other person's kind of backing up, And so space is cultural as well. Then you've got social distance, the level at which, the space at which you feel included in conversations, okay? That's a little bit wider, but if you were to sit way back there, how intimate would you feel in this situation? You'd be more tempted to check out or log out, right? Because you're not sitting up close, and you do it purposely because I don't want to be in a space where I can be included. You do it subconsciously. And then there's also public distance. The level at which we think it's acceptable to be included in anything besides the classroom, like, if, I don't know, somebody's giving a speech, you know what I'm saying, and you're on a platform outside, at what level do you engage? That's between 12 and 25 feet, something like that, okay? Okay, so this is the last thing. Just, where have you experienced this? We're kind of out of time. I don't know if y'all have classes or anything like that. But if y'all want to think about, I'll just leave you with this because we are out of time. But where have you experienced this? Some type of difference in verbals, nonverbals, the way you've had expectations on what relationships should look like, making relationships with people who are different from you. I'm talking about professional business relationships or even personal ones. Y'all been in this program for like 3 years for the most part, how has your culture influenced what you've done and how you relate to others, okay? So those are some things to think about. And let's just recap. I wanted to talk to you all about how cultures differ in making relationships. I wanted y'all to learn how cultures differ in verbal and nonverbal communication. And also, hopefully from this, you recognize your own cultural patterns. You recognize when somebody may trigger you. It may not be because they're rude or something. It just could be because they're from a different culture and something for you to think about. Okay? Questions? All right. When's the next class, y'all?
So would you say that direct and indirect also come with other characteristics? Like, a direct person can be more in-your-face person or brave or...
I'll tell you a story of my girlfriend who is African American who married, her husband is British Nigerian. He grew up in the UK, but he was Nigerian with Nigerian parents. When they had their first child, his Nigerian mother came to live with them for 6 months. And she had all these different ideas of how to raise the baby and all of that. And she would say, this is how you raise the baby, like wash the baby. This is how you change the diaper and everything. And my friend would be like, they had got into a big fight over what to put on the baby. The mother-in-law was like, I want to put on this dress.
Influence if you're a direct person or indirect person?
People ask all the time, just think about what happens here in the United States. People ask all the time, what do you do? Hey, I'm a fill-in-the-blank, I'm an engineer, I'm a pharmacist. That's not so much of a personal question. But when you start getting into personal questions like, so are you married? So do you have any kids? So how much money do you make? So what kind of car do you drive? That's going to vary with some direct people about, what you can share, and also what a direct person may think of the appropriateness, right? Like, because sometimes you don't mind sharing, I don't mind sharing, hey, I've got like 2 boys and I'm married and this and that, but it depends on the situation. You know, if I'm here to conduct business, I may not be thinking family, you know? Does that answer your question? Okay.
But sometimes when you ask, for example, how much you make, it doesn't mean that you're really curious about to know about how much they make. Just you want to make a decision if you want to go to this company or this company.
Right, but that's very private. In the United States especially, that's very private because there could be let's just take this situation, 2 faculty members here in the same rank that could be making vastly different pay, right? And it's not supposed to, you just don't talk about it. What were the negotiating things that were used? It may not be it was unfair, but somebody was able to negotiate this, negotiate that. So you don't talk about it because it could be a huge contention. Here in the States, it's like, oh, wait. You make 10,000 more than me? And I've been here 5 years longer. And you're just not supposed to talk about it. So it's very private. Sometimes it can cause shame because you know what I'm saying?
Okay, I'm not supposed to ask, but now how do I negotiate the best salary for me? Because if I get somewhere and just I happen to hear so-and-so is making more than me, but yet we're of the same rank, you know, it can get somehow.
Right.
That is one of the biggest issues.
So one of the things that you do, especially here, you start looking at what does everybody make. Now, number one, public servants, you can look up salaries and find out what people make because that's public knowledge, okay? So you can go and do the comparison, that's the first thing. But you gotta do your research when you're negotiating. You can go to stuff like Glassdoor and see what is the average entry-level position for people in my field at this company here. So you can go around looking at that, because if you ask people, I think about it, just ask the people, tell me how much you make. You know, like who's gonna answer that honestly, because it is considered taboo. So here, you've got to do some research about what all other people are making. And occasionally you might find some people who'll share that with you, you know? But again, that comes with developing relationships, because that's not going to be something that people just, yeah.